So I will let Andy introduce his panel. We're going to be talking careers. So Andy, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. How's that?
Good.
Yes.
Good.
All right. Yeah, so like Jennifer mentioned, this is a kind of a joint panel between the Equity Advocates Committee between WLIA and Minnesota GIS LIS, and then also the recently started Minnesota GIS LIS Professional Development Committee, which I am the chair of. So for this panel, I'm going to give a brief intro of each of the panel members so you can kind of get an idea of who all is here and what their background and experience is. Each panel member kind of represents one of these sectors: equity, private sector, public, and then kind of a more overall global perspective. So we'll have kind of a kickoff question for each of them related to their specific area. And then once they've answered those, we'll just kind of open it up for Q&A for everybody to ask any questions they have. And lastly, we'll resources for professional development, mostly specifically related to Minnesota and Wisconsin, but some larger ones as well. So this is me. I'm mostly just going to be moderating and asking the questions, and I'll also kind of keep an eye on the chat for when questions come in. I'm currently a strategic advisor for Esri, so I work for the professional services side of Esri. I have about 14 years of experience with GIS in both public and private sector, and my degrees are in geography and GIS, and I do have my GISP certification. So representing the equity groups, we're going to have Sundeen, who is currently a GIS software engineer for SSP Innovations. She also has 14 plus years experience, both as GIS analyst and as a software engineer, working in multiple sectors as well. And her background, her degrees are in wildlife ecology and environmental studies, conservation biology. She has her GIS certificate and is also now pursuing a master's in computer science. Kendis Sharenbroich is going to represent the private sector. She is the president of ProWest. She has over 20 years of experience in GIS, especially in this region here, building teams to help government agencies identify and solve issues. Her background is a bachelor's degree in biology and chemistry, and she also has a master's in GIS. Jessica Fendos is going to talk about the public sector. She is currently a GIS technical services lead at Ramsey County. She also has 20 plus years of experience in GIS at all levels of government, city, state, and county. She has her master's in GIS from the U of M, and she is also a GISP. And lastly, we have Joseph Kersky, also from Esri. He's education manager for Esri. He's going to talk more kind of the global perspective of GIS careers today in general. He has over 30 years of experience in the field working for many different sectors, and his degrees are a bachelor's, master's, and PhD in geography. And he's also authored numerous chapters, articles, books, blogs on all things location, geography, and other things. So we're going to start with Kim. And their first equity related question. So what are some of the accessibility challenges that GIS job seekers may run into in the region? And are there efforts being made to address these challenges? And I have your slides, Kim, so you just let me know when you want me to go.
Great. Can everyone hear me?
Yep. I got
okay, perfect. All right, well, thanks for the wonderful intro, Andy, and I'm honored to be on this panel. I'm excited to talk about careers and how to, start the conversation on how to make jobs in GIS more equitable. Before we talk about the challenges, though, it really was kind of confusing, like how do you define equitable in terms of jobs? So here are a couple definitions, or at least I did a survey of some of my network, not necessarily a research survey, but some Google, some friends, all of those things to consider what makes a job more equitable. When you think of it, it might be something that's more accessible. Either it's a larger swath of people who see the job posting. It's available through different media, through different networks, resources. And then how you could increase the equitable nature of it is how a potential employer is involved in recruiting, and what type of hiring process. Do they have any biases in gender diversity or backgrounds that would reduce the equitable nature of that? And then the main thing that makes anything more equitable is reaching a larger audience. All right, next slide. So in thinking of the types of jobs that might be out there, now there's a ton of resources, and there seem to be always a ton of jobs available across the US, across the world even. So I did a comparison across ZipRecruiter, Salary.com, and Glassdoor, just with some generic job titles from GIS technician to GIS developer, and I think GIS manager. And it seems that ZipRecruiter tended to have, offer larger salary ranges, but in general, across these three platforms that announce jobs, at least in the digital kind of landscape, if you define equitable as providing a more, what's the term? A reasonable salary range, compared to Midwest versus the US average, I would say at least in our area, it's pretty equitable in terms of the salary ranges. So this was a fun kind of analysis, just from the salary ranges on the left from 40 to what top ranges is 120,000 up, and it increases as you gain knowledge and experience. All right, next slide. So then you want to ask, well, how can we make these jobs more accessible? In the Midwest, there tend to be fewer jobs available than what I consider the kind of the geospatial hubs, DC, St. Louis, Missouri, and the East and West Coasts. But then you have to consider what makes something accessible versus equitable. So Wikipedia, as we all like to go to, defines that the ability to access and benefit from some system or entity. So from our GIS profession, I might consider a job more accessible, when you ask these questions, are enough GIS positions announced in our area, not just on the geospatial hubs of Washington, DC, St. Louis, Missouri, or the East and West Coast. Are qualified professionals being appropriately compensated? And from that previous slide of the analysis, it definitely seems like we're on the range. We are in comparable ranges compared to across the country. And then what I couldn't identify from any research is, are GIS professionals staying in our region? That would really have to go into more depth of understanding and maybe surveying who's left, maybe who's left our area to seek companies outside. I mean, for example, a lot of my companies lately have been remote because of certain job changes that I had. So I did work locally, and now I've worked for different companies, but have been able to stay remotely. Although that said, most people are working remotely anyway. My company happens to be out in Colorado right now. So, and I think that would be a really fascinating study if the data is even out there, to know where our graduates or where our past employees, taking these jobs, are we able to keep all of the professionals local? All right, next slide. And this was kind of a fun fun slide to think about. And I know I'm kind of pushing on my time here. Annie wanted us to stay down to 5 minutes. So in thinking about where are jobs located, you know, to think if they're accessible or equitable, I found it really a fun tool. There are these two maps, gisjobsmap.com and then whatever that one is, jc.org. Both of them are some maps. Sorry. All right. Both of these maps show the locations of jobs across the world. And I don't know, Andy, if you're able to open one of them, at least you can try clicking on maybe the gisjobsmap.com. It's a nice open layers map, and it's kind of fun to just see the locations and what I consider the geospatial hubs. So if you zoom in around the US, there's generally more on the east and west coast, and then some are in Denver, Colorado, and then in Missouri. So that's where a lot of the jobs generally are available routinely, or you know, a lot of the times. So yeah, that was it for my discussion of challenges for making jobs more equitable and accessible. It's really not something that's easily defined, but it would be an interesting topic to do more in-depth research on, especially in knowing, are we keeping our GIS professionals local, or are we losing them to these other areas? You know, what keeps the professionals here as opposed to elsewhere in terms of salary ranges, culture, all of those things. So that's hard to define without doing a more exhaustive survey. All right, well, thanks for giving me a few minutes to share on these thoughts. And I'm looking forward to hearing on the rest of the topics. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim. So next we'll talk about the private sector. So for Kendis, you've been in the private sector for a long time in the area, so we're kind of curious to get your take on how private sector careers have changed in the area, kind of what the current market looks like, and maybe some comments about current desirable skills and things that employers might be looking for. Are you out there, Kendis? You might be on mute.
Sorry. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about. I've been at ProWest and Associates for 18 years and have been involved in lots of hiring over that time frame. So excited to be here. So as far as the private sector goes, here in the past several months, hiring is off the charts right now. We work with, we're a GIS consultant firm. If you're not familiar with us, we work across the country. So, and our clients are government agencies, and many of our business partners, also their clients are government agencies. And right now we're seeing a huge uptick in work across the board. In addition, we do a lot of work on the federal government side, and we do a lot of work for the EPA. And unfortunately, right now, there are a lot of natural disasters going on. There's fires, there's hurricanes, there's flooding. All of these things require GIS, and so we're seeing a huge uptick in jobs, especially those firms in the private industry that are serving government agencies, which is what we're most familiar with. So lots of opportunities out there, everything from programming to data analytics to programming, all solutions work, right? It's busy. it's busy right now. What I want to touch on briefly today is just in general, the types of skills that we look for when we're hiring. Now, we're an Esri shop, so the skills that we look for are Esri focused. The technology that we're looking for typically, and that a lot of our business partners are looking for, is experience with ArcGIS Online, Esri solution templates, the entire Esri enterprise stack, portal, ArcGIS server, data store, backend system architecture design implementation. Also, being able to work with data and doing data conversions, cloud work, experience with Pro, dashboards, web app builder, survey 123, 3D, right? Depending on the type of position that we're hiring for, we're interested in all of those types of skills. So it's really across the board. And I know that a lot of the others on the panel are going to show some examples of some of that technology and the cool things that they're doing with it. So I'm not going to go into that technology specific, but that's a rundown of the types of things that we're looking for. But I want to talk about resumes and interview skills before my time is up. So resumes and your interview with a potential employer is really your first impression. And I've sat through a lot of interviews and I've read a ton of resumes, and they are not all created equal. And so when I look at the past 10, 15 years that I've been involved in hiring, when I look at resumes, number one is that myself and our team, we're looking to make sure that the resume is aligned with the job description. So are there details in the resume that align with the type of job that we're offering? In addition, the cover letter is also really important. We're looking to see if the person has looked at our website, maybe read our case studies. Have they taken the time to understand what our business does? And have they outlined why they think they would be a good fit at ProWest? Those are things that some of our top candidates always do consistently. Make sure their resumes align with the job description and make sure that their cover letters clearly show that they've done some of their research as far as who we are, what we do, and how they see themselves fitting in. So those are key things that we like to see when we're reviewing those resumes. As far as skills during an interview, one thing that we really look for when we're doing interviews is looking for detail. We not only want to understand the cool technical things that a person has done, but we also want to make sure that the person describes just the overall big picture of the project that they're working on. Why were they working on the project? In addition, we're interested in tough issues that the person has come across in the work that they're doing. As much as we would all love to say that everything I ever did was perfect and that we never ran into problems on a GIS project, we all know that those things happen. And for me and our team, we're really interested in learning about challenges that were faced on a project, whether it was a class project, if you're or if you have been in the workforce for a while. We're interested in understanding what those challenges were and how you communicated and worked with your team to resolve those challenges. For me, that's some of the most important parts of the interview that sometimes get passed over. So we really are interested in hearing about those challenges and how people overcame them. And then finally, when we are interviewing, the technical skills are obviously important. What experience have you had in all the technologies that I've listed, right? And being able to articulate those technical skills. But most importantly, we are looking for those soft skills, right? And I know some of the others are going to touch on this too, but those soft skills such as communication, right? How have you worked with your team members? Your flexibility, your adaptability, right? To be able to face new challenges and open to change and things of that nature. Those soft skills, that overall just appreciation for learning new things and that genuine curiosity about the industry and about the data and the work that you're doing, those are extremely important traits and things that we look for in a person, in addition to those technical skills. Because at the end of the day, well, at least during a non-COVID time, we're all in a building together. And so those soft skills, those communication skills are really important in the workforce. And so we really look for folks that can articulate those skills and how they've applied them in the work that they've done or in the classes that they've taken. So high level bullet points, key things that we look for in resumes and interviews. It's your first impression for an employer, and I hope that helped. So thanks a lot for your time.
Thanks, Kendis.
Yeah.
Now for Jessica, kind of the same question. I'm sure there will be some overlap in answers, but just curious how the public sector might differ from the private sector.
Sure.
And I do have your slides here too, so.
Okay. You guys can see me okay and hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Jessica Fendos with Ramsey County Information Services. I'm here to talk about public sector GIS. It is the largest employer in the realm of geospatial technology. So if you look at the GIS launch survey in 2019, about 38% of respondents work at a government entity, for a government entity, and it's followed by the GIS professionals working in consulting. For Minnesota GIS Allies survey done last year, it also showed that 66% of the respondents are from the public sector. So my goal today is to show you an overview of the GIS development at the government level, and also some of the career tracks that are available out there. Next slide, please. So if you're interested in working for the state, and I talked to the GIS supervisor over at MinGeo, actually this centralized MinGeo office is obviously the biggest player in this arena. They have 22 staff members with 2 GIS supervisors managing statewide GIS programs and projects. And a typical job vacancy will be with the information technology specialist series from all the way from 1 through 5. And you'll be doing technical and coordination work. Next, please. And if you're interested in working for bigger agencies such as MnDOT or DNR, they also have GIS teams within MNIT, the state agency group. Again, they have ITS series available for people to work on technical and spatial database development work. And if you're a subject matter expert, you're good at housing or economic development, you can choose to work for a single state agency. But in that case, your title will be research analyst and management analyst, doing mapping and research fieldwork. Next, please. At the regional level, I talked to Met Council. They have a GIS team of 6 people. They build infrastructure for the council and serve key business users across the organization. They have a GIS system administrator opening and a Metro GIS coordinator position they're looking to fill after COVID-19 hiring freeze. Next, please. So at Ramsey County, this is where I'm from, you also see the centralized GIS, enterprise GIS sitting in the middle of IT. And we have a fantastic team of 5. I consider myself the plumber, so I build infrastructure and build a pipeline so people can access my data and services. We also have RGS Online. Can you click next? We publish our content and share with external entities through the portal. We leverage third-party products and services data. Can continue, click please. And our next endeavor is to build RGS Enterprise in Azure Cloud. Click one more time, several times. Animated. Okay, so that's what we do at Ramsey County. So trending in terms of government GIS, you see this centralized GIS serving peripheral GIS business units doing the real GIS work, right? They're the real GIS frontier workers. They do mapping and provide analysis for decision makers. And then we recently added a new business analyst to translate business needs into GIS capability and vice versa. We actually stole that GIS coordinator from Met Council, Jeff Moss, so we stole him to fill this void. We also see some emerging cross-functional roles that are needed to handle integration between GIS and other business systems, such as enterprise asset management system, open data portals, Prada, that kind of business system integration. Some people have moved on to a higher level, doing beyond just GIS. For example, P. Henschel from Carver County, he is the new CIO leading their IT shop. And due to COVID, you see this remote positions open, popping up at different levels. Next, please. So a professor from University of West Georgia, she compiled a list of 1,000 job postings from major job sites and developed a list of skill areas that the employers of these vacancies were looking forward to fill. And I want to do a shout out because Kendis, we're talking about soft skills. So don't overestimate the importance of having soft skills, because I have seen a lot of GIS professionals, they advance, get to where they are, not because they know how to program, because they're likable and they are good at communicating a concept to sell a GIS project. Next, please. This more recent survey said that there's an existing skill gap in our industry, and our workforce is not equipped to train in an emerging technology like AI. Next, please. So to address the GIS skill gap, we have a roadmap at Ramsey County. This is our GIS technology roadmap. Web and mobile GIS will continue to grow. They're important, but continue to grow. We just published our GIS hub site to engage users across the enterprise for this asset management initiative. So they can see the shared calendar from this hub and submit their survey, their feedback through this portal. Indoor GIS will be very important because for project management and also planning purposes. Drone and AI are also on our roadmap. And I think Joseph will dive into these topics even further. So thank you.
Thanks, Jessica.
Sure.
It's great to hear all the stuff Ramsey County is doing, and I think that's pretty, a lot of that stuff is pretty universal for government agencies in Wisconsin, yes, Minnesota, and elsewhere, so that's great.
For sure, thank you.
Yeah, so now we're gonna have Joseph Kersky from Esri, kind of looking at a more global perspective, and I am actually gonna stop sharing because he has something to show.
Yes, indeed, thank you so much. All right, greetings, folks. I'm going to start timer. It's a great honor to be with you all. I have great respect for the Wisconsin and Minnesota GIS communities. In fact, this is me up and close and personal with the Minnesota ice and snow at 44 north, 96 degrees west. And what's not to love about that? You got to get onto the landscape. You got to lie on the landscape. Just to refresh your memory, after the very nice introduction earlier by Andy, the reason why I share my own pathway is to get you thinking about the topic for today, and that is your career pathway. The point of this slide is not to promote my own self, but just to get you thinking about, hey, you can have numerous ebbs and currents in your flow of your career. So for me, it was government agencies, now at Esri, private company. I also, like many of you in the community, teach. So I love working with students and faculty. So I teach at several different universities. And I've also had some work with nonprofits. So again, that's just to get you thinking about, even if you start on a pathway and decide, you know what Jessica was just sharing about local government, that sounds really intriguing. And so you go down that pathway for a bit, or maybe that's so intriguing that you end up being in local government, for example, for the rest of your career. So I just wanted to lay that out there, kind of along the same lines though, as you know, what Kim and Kendis were talking about earlier. You can have a standard resume like this, or a CV, and many of us do, probably all of us do. But I want to also encourage you to create a story map of your CV or resume, because you can, well, do several things. Tell your employer that, look, you know something about web mapping tools, right? And also it's a fun way for you to kind of keep current with story maps. I highly encourage you to make sure you get a map in there, right? It is a story map after all. So make sure that, okay, I had an internship over here, and this is what I did over here, and then I went to, you know, this government agency, etc. You can also put some nerdy pictures of yourself, like me lying on a big map. Anyway, the point is, have both, and not everybody does that. So you know, I think you would stand out a bit. Another thing that I wanted to mention here in the remaining few minutes that I have is, my colleagues have touched on this a bit. Some of the forces that I believe are important to us looking forward, navigating through the remainder of the decade with our geospatial related careers. Geo-awareness is at an all-time high. Jessica, I believe, mentioned that, look, Kendis talked about GIS being, we're busier now than we've ever been before. And that's certainly true with me being on the education team at Esri, supporting universities and now teaching online and et cetera, and students and faculty and deans. We've never been busier. It's too bad it had to take a crisis, but people are realizing, hey, that JHU coronavirus dashboard, that's all based on geospatial technology, right? And so the awareness is at an all-time high of key issues of our 21st century world: climate, population, natural hazards, as my colleagues very well touched on. So that is, I think, good for us in the geospatial world. Geo-enablement, people are at least starting to be enabled by even public-facing tools to use some sort of survey instruments out there, crowdsourced Survey 123 or iNaturalist or anything else in the field like that. Also navigating just across campus or even indoors now with certain apps. And the geotechnologies, having evolved into the cloud-based platform that it is now, has opened up numerous doors in lots of additional fields. And Kim talked about equity, which I thought was a great introduction to this whole topic, and that is touching on what Kim was mentioning. Okay, we've got an increasing diversity in the geospatial tech. We've got a long way to go, certainly, but the point is, with cloud-based, we can start having conversations with the business community, right? With economists, with social workers, with all kinds of people that are outside of this sort of geo-environmental zone that a lot of us started out in. And that's really good, because to grapple with these complex problems, as you well know, is going to take a diversity of people with different backgrounds. Absolutely. Citizen science being another key force that I believe is going to be increasingly important, especially with funding for certain government agencies. We've got to have the sensor network, IoT, and also people, 7.5 billion potentially, right? People collecting data. And storytelling with maps. Maps have been used to tell stories for thousands of years, and having these tools like this story map that I'm showing right now has opened up, again, many doors, and that bodes well for us in the geospatial field. Now, Jessica talked a little bit about this as well, so I'm not going to overly dwell on this, but I believe there are these key trends to keep in mind in your geospatial career. Now, folks, in the not too distant past, there was sort of, you know, a set of manuals, right? And look, this is Mesa County, Colorado behind me, by the way, my homeland. So we're all about space and place, right, folks? But there was one pathway with some variation in the not too distant past. Nowadays, there are numerous pathways. So my colleagues have mentioned lots of different things you can get into with geospatial. And some of you may be new in the field. You may be wondering, gosh, Joseph, there's no way I can do all that. True, there isn't a way for you to specialize in every single zone, every single facet of geospatial technology. That's good. As my colleagues have well demonstrated, and as Jamie talked about in the last session, rely on your colleagues. You're a lifelong learner. But these I just submit are going to be increasingly important. The merging of interior space versus exterior space mapping is going to be increasingly important. 3D analytics. We've had 3D visualization for a long time, but now we've got 3D analytics. And so all the AI and machine learning is going to, and it already has, rapidly transform entry-level geospatial jobs. We're not going to have a whole lot of people in the near future maintaining, curating to some degree, but gathering data from scratch on fire hydrants, light poles, trees, etc. That's all going to be generated automatically with AI tools, even a video and capturing data from a video. So these are going to be transformational. Oh, I'm 1 minute over. Okay, last thing that I wanted to mention here. I believe are the top 5 skills for geotechnology professionals and instructors. Be curious, ask good questions. My colleagues touched on this as well. We at Esri and other organizations are looking for people that can think outside the software box. Why are we doing that way? Do we need an additional set of tools? Do we need to develop an additional set of tools to accomplish this task? Being able to work with data and be critical of it. I've got this spatial reserved data blog that every week I talk about societal issues, how to find data, how to know if you can trust that data. Also, know your geographic and geospatial foundations. Sure, when I'm working with business instructors and business students, they want to map their data and map consumer preferences and map competitors. They don't care so much about the things you and I care about, and that's okay. It's still a way for me to say, you know, if you're doing a global study, the map projection is important, and here's why. The symbology is important, and here's why. The classification method is important, and here's why. So even with these other audiences that don't need to have that really deep knowledge, I always try to use whatever we're working with to get them inspired to go beyond just the tools, to think about that maps are powerful tools of communication and they need to be used wisely. Adaptability, you know, go to a conference like this one and go to something that's totally outside your field, okay? I just encourage you to do that. I challenge myself to do the same thing at face-to-face and online events. So for example, at a recent AAG conference, I went to the social work track. I learned a lot from that community, their methods and so on. And so I just challenge you to do that as well. And then good communication. Despite the rise in geo-awareness, as I talked about earlier, I think you still need to have your elevator speech, your 1 minute, your 2 minute, your 5 minute speech of, you know, when you get your board of directors or your patrons or your constituents or your CEO, your city manager, whoever it is, you need to have the why your position and other positions like it actually matter and contribute to the organization. Just a couple of last thoughts building on what my colleagues have talked about here. The first thing that our HR people do, one of the first things, is they actually look at your social media presence, okay? So be careful about that, okay? If it's just all you partying and, you know, nothing wrong with having a good time, but you know what I mean? You gotta be careful about that. Also, as one of my colleagues touched on, it's all about the organization. What can you contribute to the organization? So sometimes people say, hey, wouldn't it be great to work at USGS or Esri, or, you know, I want to learn more GIS. Great, we all do. Well, why should we pay you to learn more GIS, right? What are you going to contribute to the organization? And if you're passionate about the environment, great. If you've got some geospatial skills, you're going to be able to contribute to Minnesota DNR or the Nature Conservancy or EPA or whoever you're passionate about working for. It's not just enough to be passionate about the environment, right? Hopefully you're all passionate about the environment. So it is about the organization. I love what my colleagues have said about that. Finally, don't be daunted by these long lists that sometimes come out on listservs and elsewhere of geospatial tasks with a certain job position. Oftentimes they're gathered by people in HR that really don't know that much about GIS. I mean, sad but true. They sort of scan and they dump, you know, 50 tasks in there, and people say, well, there's no way anybody would know every single one of these tasks. So don't be daunted by those long lists. Apply anyway, even if you know that if that's an organization that you see yourself fitting into, I would apply and not be dismayed by some of those long lists, realizing that they're just sort of a dumping ground oftentimes. So I'll just close off there, but I'm happy to connect with any of you on LinkedIn or elsewhere. And so thanks for having me. Over to you, Andy.
Awesome, thanks, Joseph. If you want to stop sharing, I will go back again. And I'm only going to share part of my screen now. Yeah, so now that we've kind of heard from everybody, what I'm showing on the screen here is everybody's contact info. And now we can kind of open it up to the whole group if there's any questions. And if not, I certainly have a long list of questions. One person did ask when Joe's going to visit. What is that? Poniatowski, Wisconsin.
There's also a question in there, how can we reach out reach out to local schools, primary schools, and developing an after-school club?
You know, I'll just start that conversation off. We do have a K through 12 program that I think many of you are aware of. The Minnesota and Wisconsin K-12 GIS communities are especially vibrant. They're the sort of the standout examples actually that we talk about when we're trying to get other, and in Arizona too, Jamie. But we have about between about 7,500 and 8,000 schools, K-12 schools, public, private, and home schools that have an ArcGIS Online account that they're doing something with. As you would expect, it's a wide gamut between, you know, spatial analysis and maybe just working with story maps and et cetera. But yeah, the point is, my team cannot promote that alone. We need champions like you out there in the community saying, look, you know what you have at your fingertips? You can teach science and social studies and math and language arts and so on with these tools. So thanks for being a champion, and just go to the esri.com/schools site for more info about that. I'll put it in the chat box. Thanks.
Yeah, this is Jessica Fendos. I used to teach at Dunwoody. So at that time, Esri was generous about initiating an academic site license for the college, and the students can get at the enterprise license agreement with like a very minimum license fee versus paying individual ArcMap or ArcPro licenses. It's a big saving for the school. Thanks to Esri.
One more question popped up, asking about what kind of options there are for older workers with some GIS skills that might want to do something part-time or explore a new career. Any advice for them?
So I think this general career advice, you know, from my, just thinking back on my career path and what I have experienced myself, is that some of my best opportunities really have been through networking and just really looking at organizations that I think I might want to work for and calling them, picking up the phone and talking to people. Using my network, right, to see what opportunities are out there, and to like, you know, Joe was talking earlier, put together, you know, my story map and my list of things that I enjoy doing and where I'm at in my life, and be just very open and honest and transparent about where I'm at and what I want to do, and start using that network. Pick up the phone, send an email. Every job I have ever gotten, whether it's an internship or not, has really been from just picking up the phone and putting myself out there and doing the research and contacting people. Just general experience that I've had.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Kendis, and that's something I always like to mention when talking about careers, because it's the same with me. I think every job I've had in my past has been a personal connection that kind of got me in the door. And this is a perfect opportunity too, because you have all of our contact info here. So anybody that's interested, feel free to reach out to any of us to have a one-on-one conversation. And then if there's a particular place that you're interested in working, check and see if we know somebody there. That certainly might be possible.
Yeah, you have to reach out.
Yeah.
Yes, I would also add that it's been part of, like, a huge part of my career progression of as a GIS analyst. When I was just starting out, I would kind of collect resumes and look at the job skills that I maybe didn't have and what these other jobs did have, and started seeking free resources or like low-cost training. But the biggest thing was finding volunteer opportunities. And just like Minnesota GIS LIS, Wisconsin Land Information Association, that has been the foundation of my network, of how I've learned a lot of tools, ideas. As Joseph mentioned, getting involved in fields outside of my expertise, it's really expanded my network beyond just GIS, computer science, into, you know, healthcare and social work and anything else. So volunteer work has been probably the base level of my learning.
I would just add to that, this is Jessica. When I was at school, I tried to build my portfolio, and I wish we had Story Map at that time. At that time, I actually paid a hosting service to build my own website and document all the projects I've been working on. So when I went for a job interview, I just went through the websites. I told them, okay, these are the websites I have built, and this is my experience. And if you are still in school, try to work on something that will help you find a job. Because when I was teaching at Dunwoody, I always tell them, okay, integrate your field with GIS. And some of them, they just want to map where I can hunt deer or bird watching. That's, hobby related, that's okay too. But I'm saying if you have the chance, build up your portfolio so that you can show the employers what you have accomplished. And you put them all, like Story Map is a good platform for that. And that's a great suggestion. And a lot of the free software, you can do free trial, or you can buy something relatively cheaply. And if you're part of a school organization, that's a great way to document what you have accomplished and share with the employers.
Thanks, Jessica.
Yeah, one thing to add to that I think is really important is, and especially I see this with students that are coming out of college, is that maybe they didn't have classes in Pro, right? Because Pro was just coming out maybe, and maybe they weren't introduced to it. But we'll receive applicants who document, either through story maps or in their resume, that they've taken the initiative on their own to even take advantage of some of Esri's free training that's out there. So they'll list, like I took in the past 6 months, I took all these Esri free training courses. There's a ton of them out there. Learn.gis.com. There's the MOOCs. There's all sorts of free training out there. And that's really impressive. Even if you haven't maybe gotten the coursework in your school, if you've taken any of those free trainings, or if you've read a book, or something like, does anybody read anymore? I'm not sure, but listing that stuff it makes a difference. And frankly, it helps you stand out if you're taking the initiative to learn some of that new technology and just have that overall curiosity to be out there taking some of those trainings. And so that makes it
initiative. Yeah. It's kind of like your pedigree, right? You have all the certificates behind you.
Yeah.
And can't lose.
Yep, exactly. It can't hurt.
Yeah, can't hurt.
I would just add briefly that, touching on what someone was saying about, mid-career, in my grad course at the University of Denver that I'm teaching about GIS and public domain data, which I know sounds really boring, but it's all about, location privacy and how do we know if data is any good when we can pull data down in 1 minute and have a really nice looking map. But anyway, about half of the students in there are actually mid-career. So they've now wanted to at least dip a few toes into the geospatial waters. And so I tell them the same thing. It's never too late to start doing this. And as we've all talked about today, this is a really exciting time, right? There's such a need, and there are so many things you can do with geospatial. So it is an exciting time, and there's a great demand. Also, just one last thing, and that is, oftentimes we get people that are sort of underselling themselves. Like, my colleagues have just touched on this, that maybe you weren't in geospatial in your prior job. Well, you've managed a project, right? And you've managed employees, or you've solved the problem. So we get that a lot with people like, well, I haven't done much with, embrace the things that you've done in the past, even if they're not directly geospatial.
Be confident. In order to sell yourself, to the employer, you have to like yourself first. And nobody knows everything. And yeah, that's the way it is. If you have the desire to learn and you show your initiative, I think people will think positively about you. And it's a positive influence. If you're like a bring downer or something like that, then it's a little, not a good image to present. So at a job interview, you don't want to be overconfident, but you also want to show that you have the desire to learn. And I think that goes a long way.
I know one thing I've talked about with all of you, and maybe some of you can comment, is because things have been changing so much, and jobs are really competitive, and staffing is difficult for a lot of companies right now. A lot of GIS professionals are expected to be generalists and be able to function at almost any application of the software. And so I'm curious what your thoughts are on, is there still a place for specialists out there, people that dive deep into one particular topic, or do you think everybody kind of has to be a generalist now?
Yeah, diversify, right? Your skill sets. You don't want to be just a mapper. You want to know how to manipulate a database. You want to know how to integrate with other systems, how to get at external database to bring in your GIS. So it has become broader, I think. And you're not just a mapper. A lot of people, they say, oh, I just make maps. That's my job. But a lot of times you have to know how to get at, so other people have a business table, you need to know how to leverage that and bring it into GIS and display it on a map. That's your end goal. But before that, there is a lot of data manipulation, SQL query that you need to do to get to that stage. And what kind of platform are you going to use to present your work? Is it going to be a solution package from Esri? Is it going to be a survey format? Is it going to be a web map or a story map, right? There are so many options out there. So it all depends. And you have to be well diverse to be able to, pick and choose. So it's very personal, actually. People do things differently, right?
Sure.
But to know what's in your tool set and be able to pick and choose the best combination is, up to you. And that's the fun part too.
Very good points, Jessica. Yes, the fun part, right?
Yeah, it's the fun part.
So it's a little different in the software engineering realm. And so I work for SSP Innovations, and we are mostly Esri solutions for implementing utility networks. So a lot of tracing for electric and gas and other utilities. But prior to that, it was more of a generalist. And so now it's kind of stepping, at least my role, if you're interested in more of the development, it's really stepped beyond just Esri focus. I've done open source development. So there it's not even touching on some Esri software. I know we've been touching on a lot of Esri solutions, but if we're talking about increasing your diversity, looking outside of proprietary software and understanding that companies that you'll work for are going to use a whole suite of solutions, both proprietary, open source, or custom built solutions. And it's really been a huge part of my career in understanding the business. So right now I'm working in utilities, and that's really different from maybe parcel management where I've worked, or tribal management or government resources. There's, yes, the foundational knowledge of how you manage data and how you present it to the user, but kind of the field of study, I'm blanking on the term, but like your SMEs, your subject matter experts, it's really stepping beyond the technology. And I've heard it said multiple times from the other panelists on what are your soft skills? How can you explain your knowledge beyond the technology? How can you sell a solution or a project? And it's not just selling, but coming up with the best solution for your business. So that's, anyway, that's what I want to.
That requires soft skills, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely something I've always noticed has been a major asset, is to be able to, even if you don't necessarily understand the specific subject like telecom or electric or something, but you can understand what needs to be done and how the software can be applied, and be able to explain that story to someone that doesn't know GIS. So understand their point of view and explain the GIS piece.
Yeah, we're in the middle of integrating GIS with asset management system. It's the first enterprise asset management at Ramsey County. So we came across this kind of challenges as well. So how to make GIS understandable for the asset management people or the workers. It's not an easy task, and yeah, to integrate these two systems together and have them work seamlessly. Bilateral integration is a daunting task.
So we do just have a few minutes left for our time slot. I think some of us can stay on here past 4:30 if we want, but I did want to share one last slide. We have some additional resources here. Just wanted to, I'm sure this has already come up, but the WLA annual conference is coming up in February. The Minnesota GIS LS has the professional development committee that I mentioned. And on that website, you can find more info about ongoing activities. We have a year-round mentor program for anyone at any level in their career, and also do resume reviews kind of on request. There will also be a career fair hosted by this committee November 19th, so that's Geography Week. I think that's the Friday. Might have to double check the date, but it'll be that week. This website is, there's the Big Ten Academic Alliance. They are also holding a virtual GIS conference in November, where it'll be a lot of information similar to this, and then just some other technical presentations. This is the website for the GISP if you've never looked into that before. I guess we didn't really talk about it, but LinkedIn I think is really beneficial for building your career. I've gotten a lot of introductions to people and connected with people through LinkedIn. You can connect with all of us on LinkedIn, and that'll definitely kind of take you to the next step for connections that way. And then I'm not sure if this was a website that someone showed in their presentation, but again, just commenting on kind of 5 essential soft skills. Oh, that's right. Thanks, Megan. So the career fair will actually be Friday, November 20th. So yeah, we can keep taking more questions if anybody has them, or pass it back over to Jennifer and Kim.
I actually have a question. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on the various certifications that are available to people in our area, whether it be GISP or some of the Esri certifications. If you see those as being essential, optional, you know, do they help? Does it not matter? You know, be curious to hear your thoughts.
Does everybody have their GISP on the panel? I don't recall.
Yeah, I do.
Yep.
Well, in my case, I think it helped me. You know, remember I was imported, right, 20 years ago to this area. I didn't have any family members here in this area, so I didn't know anyone. And I think the only way I build myself up is to build my portfolio, and, you know, through working hard and knowing people in this field. I like doing GIS, but I also think that to have a certificate, I prefer to have one. And I work towards it, and it's something you can put on your resume. But I have known people who do not have a GISP certification, and they do well. Like my boss, he doesn't have a GISP. I guess it depends on the stage you are in your life. If you're at school, you're still in school and you're working towards getting a new job, that might be a good time to get it if you can. You need to have a degree, I think education, credentials, and also you need to publish or go to conferences. It's a combination of things. So you have to have education credits, you also have to have work experience, and also like a contribution to the GIS society. So they look at 3 different parts. But in a way, if you're committed to certification, it's kind of a motivation for you to get involved, right? You're compelled to be productive in GIS because you need to get recertified every 3 years. And I don't think it's a bad thing, but you have to pay for it though. I think it's like $300 to get recertified. So it depends what stage you're in.
I don't know if it's ever gotten me a job having it, but for me, it's always kind of been that having it, you know, on my resume or next to my name and seeing other people that have it, you automatically know that someone that has it, like you said, Jessica, has a certain degree, certain number of years in the field, but then also contributes to the community. And I think that's the real benefit of it.
I like having it.
Yeah.
I would also say that I don't know from the public sector, but if it helped me get a job, and I can't say 100% if having a GISP got me jobs. However, from the consulting side, I know RFPs or request for proposals from the consulting company, sometimes those proposals do require some staff to have a GISP or some sort of certification. So that can kind of boost you up in the maybe
Ladder.
the candidates to say, okay, well, I come with this GISP, so I could get I could win proposals, or I could at least meet that requirement for my company.
Yeah.
It opens the door wider for you, right? I mean, some jobs will require that, then you don't have to worry. Yeah, just you'll have a little more opportunities that way. And I know that some federal GIS jobs requires a GISP certification. I think a lot of the job postings that I have seen, they say preferred, right? GISP credentials preferred.
Yeah, I think for ProWest, we don't require the certifications, but it certainly helps. It certainly doesn't hurt. And we sometimes, for certain contracts that we're on, it does require a certain number of GIS or certain Esri certifications. So for me personally, I feel that anytime you can get any kind of professional certification is a good thing.
Honestly, in the whole scheme of things, it's pretty cheap compared to, you look at Microsoft certifications. Those can be several $1,000s, or a wonderful master's degree. How much money does that cost? So in the scheme of things, it is pretty cheap. It forces you to document your credentials. And if you're keeping up your own portfolio, you'll have them there. I've actually found it very helpful to have a portfolio, and then I just kind of reference that for the research. So it's been helpful.
Keep you sharp.
Okay, so I think we've hit the 4:30 mark, a little bit past. Thank you very much, Andy and company et al.